News Channel 8 presents New Skills for Living with your host, Tom Lavin, a healthy plan for healthy living.
Hello, I'm Tom Lavin. Welcome to New Skills for Living, a show dedicated to healing and wholeness in our community. If you or a loved one has ever suffered with depression or anxiety, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, or a substance abuse issue, we have a show today that will share with you information that will provide you with help and hope. We have three wonderful guests today. On my far right is Sam McCord. Sam is the Assistant Director of Nursing and the Program Manager of the Deanie Townsend Hospital at Northern Nevada Adult Mental Health. Sam, thank you so much for being with us today.
Great, thank you for having me.
And Roz Reynolds is back with us again this month. Very glad to have Roz here. Roz is the Agency Director of Adult Mental Health Services. And to my immediate right is Joe Tyler. And Joe is a consumer in recovery, and he is the president of Nevada NAMI. Joe, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Tom.
And this is part of the series that KOLO TV and Northern Nevada Adult Mental Health is co-creating. It's called The Faces of Mental Health. And in each show, we're having a consumer who is someone in recovery and mental health professionals share perspective on various topics. And so Joe Tyler, very generously, Joe is a consumer in recovery, and he's going to share a little bit of his story of what his life was like, the onset of his mental illness, and then his recovery. So Joe, please go right ahead.
Tom, everything was going along quite normally in my life before leading up to my mental illness. I had gone to locally here to the university at UNR, and then I had gone away in the Army. I was a second lieutenant, and then I had gone to master's studies back on the East Coast. Came back out here and was looking for my big career jump. I worked at St. Mary's writing high-level grants as an administrator, and then I was driving back and forth between, it's hard for me to talk about, back and forth between LA and Reno, looking for my big career jump in Los Angeles when I flipped out. And I could say it could happen to anybody, and it does. I believed I was Jesus Christ. I was just completely crazy, and I had some of the same stuff that a lot of the patients that I work with have at the hospital, just delusions, hallucinations. I had olfactory hallucinations, means tasting hallucinations. I had all kinds of just real distortions in my senses. I came back here and I was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia right off the bat. My parents luckily took me back, and that was a big key because family support is very important. And my parents took me back in, and they let me stay with them, and I went through going on the old medications, because this has been 20-some years ago, 28 years ago now. And I was on the old medications, and they worked in varying degrees, and like many of our patients today, they would go off, I would go off and on medications. And you got to stay on your meds, but they were so sedative, they were so old and barbaric, all old terrible meds. And I am finally in 1994, I got on some of the latest state-of-the-art stuff, because it first came out. In fact, kind of a little anecdote, I marched my whole group family therapy session over to the doctor's office because they were testing this medication. They wouldn't put me on it. They wouldn't pay for it. And I had been on it for 3 months and was working good. And so I advocated myself and got everybody to hang out at the director's office until they put me on it. Mm-hmm. And really it's been kind of good from there, because that's like the fog had lifted, that medication. Mm-hmm. And from there, I wear this tie because today I'm running for the national NAMI board, on the national level, and I've been working now at the Deanie Townsend Hospital, the Deanie Townsend for 3 years, and in the state system now for 8 years. So I'm indeed a success story, and I get to share that with people in the hospital, and it's a good feeling to give back.
Yeah.
You know, it's a good feeling to give back. So.
Yeah, Joe, and you're working and you're helping a lot of people. You have a wonderful marriage to Bunchy, so things have really just turned around for you in your life. And thank you for your generosity, Joe, in sharing your story with us. And Roz, maybe you could comment on what you heard of Joe's story for us, okay?
Sure. It's a really important, powerful thing that Joe does by sharing this story with everyone. And I have to say, Joe and I went to the same high school.
Oh, wow.
Worcester Colts.
Yeah, we were Worcester Colts.
And I say that because everybody knows somebody who has mental illness, whether we are aware of that or not. And the important thing is to do as Joe did, to get your support in place, get into treatment. There is a trial and error period about medication, and the medications are so much better now than they were when Joe was first diagnosed and treated. So many fewer side effects, but still there's no test you can take to say, okay, this is the medicine that's going to be right for you. You have to develop a relationship with your doctor. You have to advocate for yourself the way Joe did. Tell them how the medicine works, what your side effects are, what you can live with and what you can't. And the doctor then can respond to that with a variety of different kinds of medications and different doses. So it's important to develop that relationship and advocate for yourself and report what's happening.
Yes.
And the whole process then of stabilization of the mental illness then frees you, as Joe said, the fog lifted, and then he could start his life, his recovery, be who he is, use his skills, his education. You know,
and
Joe, you've accomplished so much.
I don't think it takes away who you are at all. I think I'm more, my brain has come back so well that I'm doing more than I was in graduate school now as far as productivity. Of course, I'm fighting harder because I'm a recovering, you know, somebody who is recovering, but I'm fighting harder because disabilities make people struggle that much harder. You know?
That's a wonderful story of help and hope, and we want to hear more from Sam and all of the rest of you. After this brief break, we're going to return and talk a little bit more about different services at Adult Mental Health that are able to provide help and hope to so many in our community. Hello and welcome back to New Skills for Living. We're taking a look at mental illness and the services that Northern Nevada Adult Mental Health Center offers to provide help and hope to people in our community. And Joe was sharing in his story about his early recovery, and it's great that we have Sam McCord here from the Deanie Townsend Hospital. Sam, you do that work where you help people get stabilized and develop this new vision of help and hope in their life. Could you go ahead and maybe flesh out a little bit from your perspective what you heard from Joe?
Yeah, and connecting it a little bit to what Joe said, you know, getting to that support and knowing that there's a place in the community where there are clinicians that have the expertise and have the sensitivity to understand without that stigma, without that concern that what are people going to think. Make sure that everybody out there knows that it's a very confidential environment. Matter of fact, not just because of federal regulations that dictate that, but because of the expertise and professionalism that people have. One thing I heard Joe say was that he had his mom willing to take him back in, and that sounded like a real big turning point. I don't even want to think about what might have happened with Joe if he didn't have that start. And on the break, you're talking a little bit about your relationship with Bunchy and how that has been important. And you know, anybody that is in your sphere of influence or influence of with you or a relationship with you, to give you that little incentive to say, you know, there is help out there, and there are people who care. Joe did another great thing that after things were going better for him, he was able to stand up and advocate for himself. And that's one of the other great services that the clinical staff on the inpatient side of the care model really, you know, give to a person. They need to be advocated for. It may be something as simple as a mental health technician who is working on the floor in close connection with someone telling their story and making sure that that gets to the clinical staff that makes decisions about medication, that makes decisions about opportunities in the community, even connected with outpatient services after they leave the hospital, or just housing or places where they can get follow-up counseling, medications, because we're not just about getting people to a stable place, but advocating for them to go to the next step to make sure that they leave with every opportunity to succeed and all the resources. And there are so many different choices and resources. You need specialists to help guide you a little bit with that. And Joe did a great job in his situation of soldiering through and really stepping up. And that's sometimes unique. There is stigma attached to the mental health issues that people face. And it's hard for people sometimes to do that. So we're there to provide a lot of that.
And Sam, I get a chance with my continuity of care. Speaking of continuity of care, I get an opportunity to see people in the hospital, as well as in the drop-in center and in the core program or in some of the other programs. And I volunteer doing a support group in the community at Renown Health. So there's opportunities to see people going all the way through the system, coming back out, and then sometimes in NAMI they can even volunteer for the educational programs. So the whole thing can fold around one itself.
Roz, let me ask you this. We heard some important things from Sam and Joe about confidentiality and help and support. Now, in this last minute, could you tell us about empowerment? Sometimes people are afraid if they get involved with mental health, they're going to lose the power to choose and their autonomy.
And I think that's especially an issue when people think about coming to the hospital.
Right.
That's been a stigmatized thing. And these days, coming to the hospital is for a very specific purpose. It's very short stay. I think our length of stay right now average is 9 or 10 days. It's just to get stable, to be safe, get stable, get onto your medicine, get a plan in place, and then move back out into the community. So hospitalization is just an acute phase kind of intervention at this point. Nobody gets stuck there. So I think it's important for people to know that. And then the stabilization continues once you're back out into the community. You start adding in your supports, figure out what supports you need, get those in place, and start taking on just pieces of your life as you're ready to do that.
And of course, taking medications is so important.
Joe, we want to get to that right after this brief break. We'll be catching up and talking about medications and psychotherapy and back-to-work programs and all the services. We'll see you after the break. Hello and welcome back to New Skills for Living as we talk about recovery from mental illness. Sam, would you tell us a little bit more about what people might expect if they themselves make the choice or their loved ones encourage them to go over to Deanie Townsend to get some help?
Well, when you walk in the front door, and I'll try to make this quick because we have a lot of services, it'd be hard to do quickly as the time we have, but I can guarantee a couple of very important things. They'll have somebody who spends time with them assessing, and we'll have everything from a psychiatrist to a social worker, a licensed clinical social worker, a registered nurse or psychiatric nurse, initially involved in that assessment process. And that is about finding where we can best serve them. It may be just some medications for that day and connecting them with an outpatient follow-up. It may be coming into our observation unit, which is a 72-hour unit, and that's designed to give us 72 hours based on a legal commitment. Sometimes if someone's in danger of harming themselves or are just so, much in crisis with their mental illness that they can't take care of themselves, they're in danger of not being able to protect their own welfare. In that 72-hour period, more doctor, physician assessments are going to take place, and they'll decide, sometimes medications can work pretty quick. People can get back out on their own again, and we can reconnect them there. But if they need more help, then we have the inpatient units. And the inpatient units, as much as we're focused on trying our best to get people back going forward in their lives outside of the hospital, we really want to make sure they're prepared. And we actually spend a lot of time preparing the patients to advocate for themselves there. If the doctor says, I think you're ready, hold up, I'm concerned about this, or how I'm going to deal with a situation that could very easily get them back into a readmission. That being said, readmission's not a problem. A lot of people have been to our programs, feel bad about like they've been a failure, and it's just another opportunity to go forward with that treatment and get it right. You mentioned that we have different, I call them recipes of medications, and sometimes it takes a few recipes to get the cooking right, so to speak. It's kind of a goofy metaphor, but I don't know whether that's the first, the second, the third, the 10th admission. It does happen, and every time people come in, they're going to get the same service. Mental health technicians trained at the highest level you're going to find in northern Nevada. Psychiatric nurses, 20 years in the community, I've never seen as well experienced and high-trained, experienced psychiatric nurse. Allied therapies, vocational skills, and our social services team are just expert. And that's a lot, and I know we don't have much time, and I want to make sure that Roz and Joe have an opportunity to connect with this idea, because Joe actually does some of these groups, helps folks recognize that there's somebody they can relate to, and he's kind of funny. He does a little bit of humor and gets people to relax a little bit and say, hey, let's get over ourselves. We got an illness and it's fixable, and he's a great connection for helping people feel comfortable.
So Joe, we have about a minute. Would you go ahead and tell us a little bit more, maybe add to what Sam said about what it's like being in the inpatient unit?
On the psychiatric observation unit, there are patients who maybe just come in the night before. A lot of times they come in at night because they have sometimes a tough stay at one of the hospitals, and then they come in and they're there, and they're just trying to make a fresh start.
Yeah.
And that's a tough thing to do, and I can't get in there and say, this is your opportunity. As Theodore Roosevelt said, this is your opportunity to make the best of the time you have with what you've got to go with. That kind of thing. Make a fresh start. And so some of them have been drug and alcohol or something like that. I say the law of the third. Some of them are drug and alcohol problems. Some of them are first-time breaks, and some of them are just off their meds, and some are all three. But that's kind of the law of the thirds that I explained down there. And some will be going for longer stays, and but they get a chance to make a fresh start. That's what it's all about.
Well, and of course that's so great. Hearing Sam talk about the wonderful staff there, and then Joe, you being a consumer in recovery, what a great combination to offer help and hope to people who are reaching out, people who are scared and hurting and needing some help and hope, to have Sam and staff and Joe offering that. We're going to take a brief break, and then when we come back, we're going to hear more from Roz and Sam and Joe about services available in our community. Hello, and welcome back to New Skills for Living. We heard Sam talking about the compassionate and expert and well-trained staff that offer these services to people reaching out for help. Many of you may not have any idea of how many services really are available here in Northern Nevada, and Roz Reynolds, who's the agency director, is going to run through those for us. So Roz, please.
Sure. I wanted to emphasize and sort of follow up what Sam said about you may come into the hospital on a Legal 2000, which is designed to protect both your civil rights and your safety.
Yes.
But once that's resolved, and we can get that out of the way once it's no longer an issue, and get you back out into the community, the stabilization continues. And you take the assessment, the expert assessment that Sam described in the hospital and the treatment plan developed out into the community, so that we know immediately, do you need service coordination? At what level do you need it? Do you need a PAC team, or do you need just sort of medium service coordination? Do you need to be in the mental health court program? Do you need housing? What are some of the basic needs that we need to get in place? Have you got all your income entitlements in place? So those basic things we work on first. There's, of course, medication clinic with doctors and nurses who continue to follow both your medication and your health, and try to coordinate your health care as well with primary care physician. And then there are co-occurring disorders program, our drop-in center, lots of recovery opportunities. So as you move out of stabilization, you move into recovery and achieving some of your life's goals, education, volunteering, a job, any of your particular talents you want to pursue. Musicians and artists and people who love to write poetry, and all the things that each of us has that are particular interests that express who we are. You begin to go after those things. You redevelop your relationships, recover whatever role you had before in terms of either a job or being a husband or a brother or wife or mother. Sometimes parents regain custody of their children. All of those things are possible once you stabilize and then engage in your recovery. And the important thing is to stay engaged, not to leave the hospital and then just quit everything, because that's when people start to cycle through.
Now, Roz, among all those things that you mentioned, could you talk a little bit about the co-occurring disorders?
Sure.
What do you mean by that?
Sure. Co-occurring disorders typically means, at least in our agency, treatment for someone who has both a mental illness and a substance abuse disorder of some kind, an addiction of some kind. And we're working on developing an agency where all of us are more co-occurring capable, but we do have a specific program that's psychoeducational, try to help people first reduce the harm in their lives and eventually overcome their addiction, as well as get their mental illness in control. So they're both treated at the same time.
Great, thank you, Roz. So, Joe, in this last half minute, as a person in recovery, if someone out there is saying, gosh, I'm having a problem with my depression or my anxiety or my substance abuse, or a family member that wants to get help, what would you say to them, Joe, in this half minute? You got 15 seconds now, Joe.
Get some help,
Yeah.
because it's so important. There's no reason to suffer with these disorders as much as people do. And there's a lot of stigma, I realize, but get to the psychiatric assessment service. It's over there at the Deanie Townsend Hospital. It's a third mile down the road off of Galletti, and just get there, and they will see you, they will assess you, they will help to get you on the road to recovery.
So, what three wonderful guests to share with us about the help and the hope available in our community. Thank you for joining us in this series, Faces for Mental Health. We ask you to join us again next month, where we're going to take a look at the mental health court and how NAMS is working with the police officers in our community. Thank you very much.